This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Frances Rose, issue number 1 when your agency looks at generative AI.
That's a really important thing for agencies, to sort of take a look and say, okay, what problem is it that we're trying to solve for? And is the technology the best or only means to do that?
Candace Wright of the Government Accountability Office on FedGov Today in just a moment. Uniting program strategy, advanced technology, process, and execution for a more efficient government. That's Maximus. Every program, every service, every time. That's innovation forward. Learn more at maximus.com/federal. Federal agency use cases for artificial intelligence are growing faster than ever. The Government Accountability Office finds generative AI use cases were 9 times more common in 2024 than the year before. Candace Wright is Director of Science, Technology Assessment, and Analytics at GAO. Candace, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me today. What did you find when you looked at the use cases that agencies are pursuing in AI? Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having me. So this work that we did was looking at the uses of generative AI. I'll refer to it as Gen AI, just to keep it short. And to do this work, we looked at how 11 agencies were using generative AI, looking at information that they had reported in their use case inventory. What we discovered is that overall, the use of generative AI or Gen AI has escalated rapidly. Since 2023, it grew from 32 to now 282 use cases, so basically a 9-fold increase. I'll also note that to sort of get to that information, we looked at the overall AI use cases that agencies were reporting, and there we saw that the AI use cases had nearly doubled from 23 to 24, going from 571 to well over 1,000 or almost 1,100 use cases. So quite a lot of activity, lots of interest in exploring this technology in government.
There's a terrific graph in your work that I think is really demonstrative of where agencies are going, Candace, on generative AI. And I note from that, the Department of Health and Human Services went from 7 use cases during 2023 to 116 in 2024. Were you able to get any kind of a view into what was driving the increase in Gen AI in particular agencies? Was it certain mission outcomes that they were trying to address, or was it just the proliferation of the technology, that it's more available for people to use? Any sense of the why behind the numbers?
I think it's a combination of different factors. There's a lot of excitement with this new technology. You can't go anywhere today without hearing about AI, and especially Gen AI, thinking about, the use of commercial products like ChatGPT and Gemini, for example. So just fueling a lot of excitement and, realizing that there's the great potential and the promise of the technology to bring different kinds of benefits to the federal government and its operations and how it delivers services and carries out its mission. I think in the case of HHS, certainly one of the areas that we saw that there was a lot of use was in the health and medical topic areas, so to speak. Agencies now have to identify which topic areas their AI use cases fall into, and health and medical is one area. As you noted, HHS certainly saw a lot of growth. We've seen that they're using the technology in a couple of different ways. One, to use it to be able to extract information from lots of publications. They're also using it to identify various disease outbreaks like polio, for example, to help them identify where there may be areas of concern, public health concerns, to be able to help contain the virus.
You write, agency officials told GAO they face several challenges to using generative AI. And I'd like to walk through each of these and see if you can give me a little deeper background into some of the challenges agencies might have told you about. The first one that you write about is complying with existing federal policies and guidance. Is that more a factor of, because the technology is so new, there might not be as mature a level of existing policies and guidance as the agencies would like? Or what kind of was the disconnect for the agencies when it comes to that policies and guidance situation?
Yeah. So we've certainly heard that complying with existing federal policies and guidance is a concern for the agencies. And I think really a lot of that comes from, how do you ensure that this technology that is advancing so fast, so rapidly, that policies can keep pace with the technology itself? There's certainly unique risks. When we talk about generative AI, we're talking about creating new content, and that can be in text, images, articles, many different sort of content, if you will. And so there's just a concern, especially around privacy, whether or not the data that are being used to train these models and then the outcomes, if the privacy policies, for example, are keeping pace with the way in which the technology operates.
The second item that you write about as a challenge that agencies raised to you was having sufficient technical resources and budget. That seems pretty straightforward and seems to be a pretty standard challenge for just about everything that every agency does in every area. Is there anything unique to the generative AI effort that agencies are undertaking when it comes to sufficient or insufficient resources and budget, or is it pretty much standard operating procedure, Candace?
I think it's certainly a lot of the common things that you find when you look at investing in emerging technologies. One of the things that I would say comes at a really great concern for the agency is making sure that they have the advanced computing infrastructure that's needed to support generative AI. That kind of infrastructure can be very costly, having the right resources. Certainly there are agencies like the Department of Energy, for example, that will have various supercomputing resources. And so now there's the question of how do they, try to work with other agencies to make that available. And then I think, too, one other thing to consider is the fact that, while there's lots of excitement and interest in investing in generative AI, it could come at the cost of making some trade-offs about investments in other technology modernization or technology investments. And so, those are all things that agencies are trying to wrestle with.
The last of the three challenges that you write specifically about in this work is maintaining up-to-date appropriate use policies. And you make two notes about that I think are interesting. One note is you say officials at 10 of 12 selected agencies said existing federal policy, and you mentioned the data privacy policy as one example, could prevent obstacles to adoption. And the other note that you cite is officials at 4 agencies told GAO the technology's rapid evolution can complicate establishment of generative AI policies and practices. And that, I think, the reason that jumped out at me, Candace, is because it speaks to the challenges that agencies have talked to me about, which is, should we be figuring out how to govern this technology at our agency based on our mission, or is there a role for somebody at OMB or some other government-wide organization to decide this is the framework under which agencies should use? And I wonder if any of the people that you talked to raised any kind of issues like that in the context of these two issues, is not only is the evolution complicating things, but we don't know where that guidance should come from or whether we should do it on our own.
So the way that I would answer that question is when you think about AI more broadly, and certainly Gen AI, it's really a team sport. It's an all hands on deck, lots of different perspectives that need to weigh in. Certainly from the developer side, but also your legal experts, your privacy experts, your procurement folks, your human capital folks. Certainly one of the things that really is important is that governance piece in terms of what are going to be the use cases for the system. And you want to make sure that you have appropriate policies in place relative not just to the system itself, but the actual use case. We've certainly seen over the years more guidance, more frameworks coming out to help agencies through that effort. And even more recently this year, various executive orders as well as OMB guidance coming out for agencies to transition and moving forward in how the technology will be advanced within their agencies, but across government more broadly. You have things like the NIST risk management framework that was issued several years ago, and I think will continue to be modified to meet the current operating environments and challenges that agencies are facing. And then I'll also just put in a plug for GAO that, back in 2020, we actually issued an AI accountability framework really to guide responsible development and use of AI, because we saw that there was a gap, something like that didn't exist at that time, and wanted to, provide that as a resource for agencies that might be developing and implementing the technology, but then also all of those folks who are involved in ensuring responsible use and accountability. And so that's, also another framework that exists out there. And we were very pleased to hear that, agencies who we were talking with noted that they were using that as a resource. But again, as I said, there's new guidance coming out this year and, lots more development as the policy landscape evolves.
I especially note your comment about use cases and the fact that this focused on use cases right in the title of this work, because agencies, I think, have been more deliberate about directing their efforts toward use cases instead of implementing the technology than probably any technology that I've observed agencies using or introducing over the last 15 to 20 years. Did you get a sense of how agencies are developing their use cases, or was your responsibility just to track what their issues were in implementing those use cases, Candace?
We focus more on understanding what use cases are out there, what are being reported. That being said, I think as things continue to progress in this area, there'll be a lot more interest in understanding what are the decisions that are leading to using generative AI for those certain use cases. And I think that that's a really important thing for agencies, to sort of take a look and say, okay, what problem is it that we're trying to solve for? And is the technology the best or only means to do that? Again, to make sure that they're applying it in the appropriate way to the appropriate problem that they're trying to solve for.
Candace, it's wonderful to have you on the program. I appreciate you discussing your work, and I thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
You can find a link to the work Candace and her team did on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. The next FedGov Today podcast is coming Tuesday. To make sure you don't miss it, follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows, and you can listen on demand anytime you want at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Thanks for listening.